This presentation is a basic introduction to some of the fundamental terms associated with filmmaking. We're going to start off with the term frame, which refers to the dividing line between the edges of the screen image and the enclosing darkness of the theater. In a more contemporary context, this could refer to the edges of your laptop screen or the edges of a flat screen TV. It's also known as the single photo of film, so it could be a screenshot or a screen grab from a digital video, and in essence it's a still photo frame taken out of a moving image sequence. Next we're going to talk about shots, camera shots. A camera shot is basically the amount of subject matter within the frame, and shots can vary in duration from subliminal to quick to average to lengthy. Subliminal may only last a few frames, so you wouldn't even notice it in the blink of an eye. A quick shot could be less than 1 second. An average shot could be more than a second but less than a minute. And a longer or lengthy shot could be over a minute long. A camera shot can be a continuous sequence before the sequence is cut through editing. And different types of shot that exist. We'll start with the establishing shot, or extreme long shot as it's known, the ELS, and this is a type of shot taken from a great distance, almost always an exterior or outdoor shot, and it tends to show much of the locale and sets the scene for the action to follow, as we can see from this example from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The next shot is the long shot, or LS for short if you're using abbreviations for your storyboards. And long shot is a relative term. It's basically a shot taken from a sufficient distance to show a landscape, a building, or a large crowd. And we can see in this sequence here, or this frame from Austin Powers, the two main characters are in the foreground, but in the background there is a crowd and quite a lot of activity, so we can see what's going on in the background. The next type is the medium shot, or MS for short. Again, a relative shot somewhere between a long shot and a close-up that might show two people in full figure or several people from the waist up. As we can see in this frame here from The Talented Mr. Ripley, the three main characters are shown from the waist up, but we can see their full upper bodies and heads contained within the frame. The close-up, or CU, is a shot of a small object or face that fills the screen. It tends to add importance to the object that's being photographed. So as we can see from this shot of Charlie Sheen in Under Pressure, the top of his head has been cropped off and the left side of his hand has also been cropped, and the effect is that our attention is drawn to the expression on his face and the object that he's holding, namely the gun. Next we have the extreme close-up, or ECU, and this can be a shot of a small object or part of a face that fills the entire screen. As we can see in these two examples, the one on the left shows a very small note blown up to fill up the entire frame, and the one on the right shows an extreme close-up of a face, and we can just see the features of the face and the expression. Our attention is drawn to those. Next we have the over-the-shoulder shot, and this usually contains two figures, one with his or her back to the camera and the other facing the camera, as in during a conversation. In this clip from Castaway, we can see Tom Hanks being spoken to by the female character, and the camera is looking over her shoulder. What tends to happen in sequences like this is that the camera will flip around to the other perspective, and we may see over the shoulder shot from Tom Hanks following that particular shot. Once we've spoken about shots, we need to think about camera angles. So a camera angle is determined by where the camera is placed, not by the subject matter. So it's not about what happens in the frame, but it's more about where you actually put the camera. Different angles can serve as commentary on the subject matter. So in other words, the angle you choose can say something about what's happening in the frame. A bird's eye view, for example, is where the camera is placed directly overhead. It tends to be extremely disorientating, and it makes the viewer feel quite godlike, as we can see in this example. It looks like you're looking down on an ant colony, and it's a view that we wouldn't be accustomed to seeing in daily life. Next we have the high angle shot, or HA for short, and this is where the camera looks down at what is being photographed, and it usually tends to take away power from the subject and make the subject seem less significant. It also gives the viewer a general overview of what's happening in the frame. The low angle shot, on the other hand, is when the camera is located below the subject matter, and what happens is the subject, there's an increase of height and power in how the subject is perceived by the viewer. As you can see in this shot, the camera is basically placed quite low down, and the camera is tilted to face up at the subject in the frame. Next we have the oblique angle, and this is when the camera is tilted laterally so that figures appear to be falling out of the frame, and it tends to suggest tension and transition in the story, and is sometimes used as the point of view of drunkenness or disorientation, as we can see in The Matrix here, and also more recently in the movie Inception. This oblique angle is used to full effect. Point of view angle is when a shot is taken from the vantage point of a particular character. In other words, what the character sees. So the camera takes on the role of the character's eyes, and we see what they see. Eye level shots, or angles, are roughly 5 to 6 feet off the ground. This is the most common type of camera angle, and it's the way an actual observer might view a scene in daily life. And that's the reason why it's the most common, is because we tend to observe the world at eye level 90% of the time. Camera movement, we've spoken about frames, shots, angles, and now we're going to speak about movement. So the first type of camera movement is what's called the pan, and this is when the camera moves horizontally on a fixed base, in other words, on a tripod. So when you rotate the camera left and right on the horizontal axis of the tripod, that's what's known as a pan. A tilt is similar but a different direction. So this is when the camera points up or down from a fixed base. It's when you tilt the camera forward and backwards on the vertical axis of the tripod. Next we have the tracking or dolly shot, and this is when you attach the camera and tripod to a set of wheels and literally move the entire contraption through space, left or right, forwards or backwards in 3D space, but the camera itself stays in the same plane. A boom shot is when the camera moves up or down through space, so again similar to the dolly or tracking shot, but the boom is moving up and down through space. A zoom is not technically a camera movement, but rather it's a shift in the focal length of the camera lens to give the impression that the camera is getting closer to or farther away from an object. And most cameras these days come with built-in zooms or zoom kit lenses, which allow you to adjust the zoom on the subject quite easily by just twisting the lens. So getting from scene to scene is transition. So when we're going from one shot to another or one scene to another, how do we do that? The most common way is the cut. So this is when there's a transition between shots or scenes, when one shot ends and another one begins. So for example, we might go from a long shot to a close-up and then to an overhead view, for example, or a point of view shot. The cut is the most common way to link shots together, and it's literally linear, one shot after the next, and they just play in sequence. A dissolve is a fading effect. It's a gradual transition in which the end of one scene is superimposed over the beginning of a new one. A fade out, fade in transition is when a scene gradually goes dark or a new one gradually emerges from the darkness, and this tends to be at the beginning and the end of a movie, also at the end of certain scenes where closure is required. A wipe effect is an optical effect in which one shot appears to push the preceding one off the screen, and an iris, similarly, is an optical effect where one shot appears to emerge from another shape on the screen. Both of these are kind of gimmicky optical effects that tend to come built in with editing software these days. However, they have been used to good effect in some of the great classics. George Lucas is quite a fan of these. So what this all means, we've looked at some of the basic elements of filmmaking and some of the basic terminology, the fundamentals that a director can use to tell his or her story. And then through editing, these shots and sequences are put together to create a coherent story.